too much to worry about. So I hope that's okay for you, that we'll do this recording. So welcome back. We did Aleph last time. We're doing the second one this time into the Hebrew letters. If my screen will allow me to move anything on and do anything, be very nice. Yes, we're going to do, we did the first one, Aleph. We're going to do Bet today. And I'll just very briefly remind you of the codes of creation, the Hebrew letters, not just handy tools to transcribe Hebrew speech, rather they're vessels through which God creates the entire universe. And we're told that in the opening chapters of Genesis, which we're about to start on Sunday. We start a cycle of reading from a festival called Simchat Torah. And so we start on Sunday with Bereshit, which is the first chapter of Genesis. And so this week we're just finishing the very, very last chapter of the Torah, where Moses dies. And Joshua takes over. So that we're coming to the end. But the beginning is God telling you about not telling us, saying, let there be light, let there be waters above and below. It's all let there be words. And these 10 statements we think of as almost garments through which the divine energy is translated into some physical existence. And the Hebrew terms based on these 10 utterances become the Hebrew name of things, its life source. And as I said, God is called Hashem, the name, one of the names. And names are the basis of what is. Adam is a name of somebody who comes from the earth, Adamah, and Adam names things in Genesis. So there's this sort of connection between things. And I said that Hebrew letters have names. It's not just like A, B, C, D. They have names that mean something. They also have shapes that mean something, and definitely today's shape we'll come up with. They have sounds, and they're all consonants. A couple of them, as I said, are used. The yud and the vav can be used as vowels, but there are separate vowels. So all of them are k, b, d type sounds, consonants. They have formations because of how they're formed out of various bits, and they take on these forms. And they also have numbers to them. And I'm going to talk this week a little bit, open the door on numbers. So each week I'll add an extra bit of spice to the mix. Every letter in the Hebrew alphabet has a numerical value. Instead of counting 1, 2, 3, we do have letters, ahad, shtaim, shalosh, arba. We have numbers now. But we also, in the early days, just like in Roman things, was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1 before 5 is 6. We had Aleph Beit has numerical values, and those are called gematria, because they mean more than just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The gematria of Aleph is 1. It's the first letter. It represents the one, or the oneness of God. As we say in our very famous prayer, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, God is one. Echad being the word for 1, 2, 3 if you're counting. Aleph is 1. It's that first letter, that silent, all-encompassing letter, composed, as I said, of Yud and Vav, but it's this all-encompassing number 1. And I showed you, I think, last time that the Aleph is composed of these 2 Yud letters, which we'll come to later, and a Vav, a Yud going up into heaven, a Yud going down onto the earth, and this Vav. So it's almost like you're standing with your legs apart and your arms apart. You are the Aleph connecting up and down, and your Vav is running through you. So on this more complex level of gematria, we explain that the Aleph, which is 1, also is composed of 3 letters, 2 Yuds and a Vav. The gematria of Yud is 10. It's the 10th letter in the alphabet. And 2 Yuds, obviously, there's this Yud and that Yud is 20. A Vav is the 6th letter, So vav is 6. And when we add up 2 yuds and a vav, we get 26. This is the sort of game that we play with gematria all the time. So it's not just counting, we actually count up bits of words or bits of letters and make connections. So Aleph, this very first letter, has a gematria of 1, but it also, if you take it apart, has a gematria of 26, depending on how you want to play this one. And one of the great names of God is the 4-letter name Yud He Vav He, mispronounced Yahweh and Vav Yeh and lots of different things. It's not any of those things. And if we add up the gematria for that, Yud, as you know, is 10. He is a 5th letter, so that's 5. Vav is a 6th letter, and another He is 5. It also totals 26. So the same as this taken apart Aleph. And so this gematria will play with this connection between the Aleph being 1, the Aleph also being 26, and Yud He Vav He being this 26 letter name. That's the sort of playing around that people do. And of course, you can play it loads and loads of ways. But that's the sorts of connections we make with gematria. So it's not just counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which we have words for. This is the gematria of all the alphabet. It goes 1 to 10. Yod is 10, and then it goes up in tens, and then it goes up in hundreds. And so you make numbers out of combinations of these letters. You can do, but you can also look at a word and say, what's the gematria for that word, and make it mean something. And what we're trying to do really is make meaning all the time. So it's not just words floating around. Everything has some high significance and is highly linked to holiness, basically, because that's where words and sounds come from. The letter this week is Bet, also called Beit, and various spellings of it in English. It's the 2nd letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and so it has a numerical value of 2. And it comes in a couple of forms. It's usually sounds is, but it's a consonant, of course, but it comes in 2 forms. It's called a double letter. It has a B, which has a dot in it, and it's pronounced V without the dot. So it's got these 2 versions of it. I'll show you. Bet actually means house, and we're going to discuss that a little bit in a moment. This is the shape of the bet. It's a very square shape. You have to be careful if you're writing it to make it very square shape and have this little back bit. This is the more fancy version of it that you would see in a Torah scroll, but you have to have this back bit because otherwise it looks like a letter called kaf, which I'll go up and show you. This is the bet, which is nice and square. You don't want to muddle it up with the kaf. And that's why it's squared off and it has this little back bit to it. So it's quite important that it looks very much like this shape. Bet or vet both have this shape to them. People also call it bet to make it a stronger one, but this is how it would look normally with this dot in it, which is called a dagesh. And there are 7 letters that appear that can have dageshes in or not have dageshes in. There are other letters that sometimes get this dot in. It doesn't change the pronunciation, it just emphasizes it. I don't want to get too much into it, but sometimes if we don't have 2 consonants together, there's always a vowel in between. But sometimes we put a dot, say, into a second mem in a word. I can't think of 2 mems at the moment, of course, just to emphasize that it's really a strong m sound. It's not, it doesn't go m. We do it sometimes with other letters like the het, because it can change the meaning if you just go h rather than ch, really ch. So sometimes they get put in to just put an emphasis on it. But there are 7 of these that have this, they're called doubles. Bet is a double letter. They can be pronounced in 2 different ways, but they only count as 1 letter. So bet and vet are the second letter of the alphabet. The dagesh is this dot. And we know some of these pronunciations. So we know b and v, but some of them have changed over time. And we speak with a slightly different accent now. There's loads of different accents, and we've lost some of the really fine tuning of some of the letters. It's a bit harder to pick up. So, but bet is quite easy. Bet with a dot in is b, and bet without becomes a vet, a v. But as I said, they're both one letter. Here are the 7 double letters, plus or minus this dot. Bet and vet, we know the sounds of. Gimel, we all go g. With the without a dot, we wouldn't go y. Gimel. It's not a sound we make anymore. Dalet can be 2 versions, but everybody just says d. So whether it has a dot in or not. Kaf does change, like bet. The ones in bold do change. Kaf can be kaf. K with the dot, h without the dot. The same with pay and fay. We definitely make different sounds, p and f. So they're the same letters, but with or without the dot in. Reish apparently used to, without the dot is reish, but nobody uses that. So everybody just writes reish without the dot, and everybody goes r. Tav and thav, or tav and sav, also, some people distinguish it. It's more of an Ashkenazi thing now, I think, than other pronunciations. But it's very, very hard. Sorry, somebody keeps phoning me and I can't deal with it. It's very hard on some of these letters to hear the difference now, and I don't think you need to know more than bet, kaf, pay, and tav, maybe. The others we don't really do. There's also a grammatical thing around what are called, these 7 letters are called begud kafat, because of course we take the b, g, d, k, p, f, so we call it begud kafat because we're just like making acronyms. And there's a grammar thing around them, whether you put the dot in or not, if it's at the end of the word or at the start of a word or before a particular next word with a strong or soft sound. So there are grammatical things that make a difference to them. Obviously, I'm not going to do Hebrew grammar. They also make a difference in a book called the Sefer Yetzirah, which I will introduce in a few classes time. Obviously, I can't do everything at once, but there are this existence of these double forms. And in Sefer Yetzirah, it has this book of formation. It has the significance to it. It's a Kabbalistic type significance or pre-Kabbalistic type significance. And I'll talk about that when we get to it. Bet has lots of different meanings. As a prefix, it's a very important letter, grammatical letter, because it's often used to mean in or at or with something. So if you put b before a word, it means in or at or with quite often. Bebait, in a house. Ba'ima, with my mother. So it can act as a prefix. And in Hebrew, there are prefixes and there are suffixes. It's a bit like Spanish, where they add things onto the end of the words. They can also, in Hebrew, can put things on the beginning. So bet can have that meaning. The Torah actually begins, sorry, I meant to write that out. The Torah actually begins with the letter Beit. The very, very first word of the Torah is Bereshit, which starts with the second letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And the first 3 words are Bereshit bara Elohim. Bereshit. Resh also means Rosh, also means head, or first. So in a first or in a beginning or in his head. Oops. Bara means created, or it also means imagined. Elohim, and here we have our very important Aleph version of God. El, Aleph. So in in a beginning. It's not a, doesn't have a proper vowel underneath. I'm not going to explain this, but it doesn't have a proper vowel underneath. And so we think it says in a beginning, not in the beginning. God created God, the universe, or heavens and earth. You could also translate it as Bereshit, in his head, imagined God. There's lots of ways to translate things, but it's interesting that it starts, the most important book for us starts with the B and not the A. Why not with this huge, big, silent letter? And so, of course, we don't just let that pass. There are volumes written on it. We don't let anything just sink away. Why didn't we start with an Aleph? And so there's books of Talmud, Genesis Rabbah, points out that the letter is closed on 3 sides and open on 1. This indicates that one can investigate what happens after creation. Remember, we read that way, but not what happened before it, or what is in the heavens or below the earth. Be here and now, basically. That's one interpretation of why start with this letter and not the Aleph. It's closed. You can't go backwards. You don't have the power to look backwards. You can only really continue forwards, onwards. I quite like that interpretation. It's not the only interpretation. I'm sure you can come up with some yourself, but I like the idea that it's closed off here, and so we're going forward into here and now. And there is a psalm about the heavens belong to God and the earth to humans, and we shouldn't inquire too much about what's going on upstairs. We don't need to know. It's there, it's here now that we need to worry about the earth, not the heavens. It's not our problem. Bet is also means a house. Beit is a house, and it looks like a house with a person standing in it. Here's a sort of house, and your entrance, you've come in. It's a house set firmly on the earth. So that could be another reason why it's the first letter, Bereshit. We're creating something down here. We're creating a universe out of nothing. And there's a lovely one where Jacob slept in the wilderness and he thought he was alone, but when he woke, he learned about the Beit. He says, surely God was in this place and I didn't even know. There's a sudden realization that God is everywhere moment. And so he named the place Beit El. The place of man became the place of God. So this, he just went to sleep, suddenly becomes this holy place. Beit, house, El, God, house of God. And it points us to the fact that to make us and our homes and our planet holy, into a Beit and be at home, or you can make it holy and you can walk into a Beit in the world and realize that it's been made holy for all of us. And that the Beit, the house, is where God visits. The world is the home that he's built for us, but he can visit us if we bother to invite him. We have to make that initial invite. We have a very different view of planet Earth and life, and it's very much about bringing holiness down. We are not waiting to go up to heaven. We don't inquire about that. We're trying to bring holiness down. That is part. We are meant to be in a relationship with the planet, with all living things. We are meant to be the of the planet. When somebody creates the house for you and is hospitable to you, you might become the owner of it, the host. I'm the host of my home, but I'm meant to be hospitable, and I'm also meant to realize I'm a guest. I'm a temporary guest on the planet, and guests are meant to behave as well. It's not just hosts that have to behave, guests have to too. And so we're in this relationship between being a host and being a guest. And God is hosting us in this universe, in this house of ours. We also, the word that we have for blessing is baracha, a blessing. And actually it comes from the word knee. And so maybe we're meant to bend our knees to the ground and make that blessing, because barach means is from the same root as ni. And a blessing on your house, we have a mezuzah on the doorpost. You must have seen those little long mezuzahs. They have scrolls in it with the prayer, the Shema prayer on it, reaffirming that God is one. So everything links up. There's no sort of randomness. At the moment, the Beit that we are in, the house that we're in, is Sukkah. We are in the middle of a festival called Sukkah, and it ends on Saturday night. So we've just gone through Rosh Hashanah, Bereshit, Rosh, the start of the year. We've come into Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. Yom means day. It was evening, it was morning, first day, Yom Echad. And now we're in 5 days later, we go into this festival of rejoicing and happiness and of simcha, of joy. And it's called Sukkah. And what we do is we build these temporary booths, because a sukkah means a booth. And we build them, even if this is flats in, I think, Tel Aviv. They've just put them up on their balconies. They're temporary sukkah, which are made of plant materials, not connected to a plant. They have to be separated from the plant, not growing still. And we put them up, and we have dinners, and some people sleep in them as well. I have to say, in Britain, it's not quite the same, because they're meant to be quite leaky, so that you can see the stars, but it also means you get rained on. And they are it is a festival that celebrates water, because it's a harvest festival as well. You bring in the harvest at this time of year, and you thank God for the rains that made everything fruit, and you pray for rain. There's a whole thing about praying for rain. And also in the old days, when there was a temple, they used to have this water libation ceremony where they would wash the entire temple out, and it would be like this huge moment of water from the springs in Jerusalem being washed all over the temple, and then everybody celebrating all night long. You're also meant to invite people to your sukkah, guests to the sukkah, because the house should be hospitable. You should have guests in, and you should also have holy guests in. And so on the first day, you invite Abraham and Sarah, and on the second day, Isaac and Rivka, and on the third day, Jacob and Leah, and so on. Tonight is Moses and Miriam, so on. It goes through the generations to remind you that people were living in these sukkah in the desert, Bar Midbar, in Bar Midbar desert, in the desert, for 40 years in these sorts of temporary accommodation. It's to remind you of your temporariness on the planet, and that everything is finite, and these are just temporary booths. So it's a commandment in Leviticus that you're going to dwell in these booths, these sort of houses, these temporary houses, Beit. And also it's a time, as I said, of a harvest. We have another tradition, we have loads of traditions, where we take 4 species and shake them in the 4 directions of north, south, east, west, up and down. And they're the 4 directions which I will come back to when I do some Sefer Yetzirah with you about different directions of the cosmic temple. So all of this is about really building the cosmic temple out of letters and words. Ours is a temporary temple, ours is a physical temporary temple. And now that we don't have a temple, our homes have become the temple. So the Beit is our temple, and our altar is our dining table. Hospitality and welcoming people in is a very important part of this festival, but it's part of Judaism, of welcoming people into your physical temple if you don't have one. And so to finish, I thought we should do a meditation on Beit. And I thought I'd just take you for a 5-10 minute journey on the Beit. And so I invite you to just make yourself comfortable, maybe close your eyes and just relax a little bit into yourselves and take 3 nice deep breaths so that you can clear whatever is troubling you. Take the breath of life in and then just really release it back out again into the universe. And have that lovely moment where you just relax into it. And just be aware of yourself, breathing in and breathing out. And start to be aware of yourself in the chair, sitting in the chair that you're in. And sit in the chair and be in the room that you're in. And just picture yourself sitting in the chair in the room. And picture that room in the building. So you're sitting in a chair in a room in a building. And that building is on a street. You might be able to picture the street. And you might be able to picture, even if you zoom out, the city that it's in. You might have a picture of what the city looks like from above. And there you are, this person in a room, in a chair rather, in a room, in a building, on a street in a city, in a country, in an area of the planet. And as you zoom out, you can see more of the planet. And it's spinning around, and there you are in your chair, in that room, on this planet. And as you zoom out a little bit further, you can see the whole solar system in front of you. And then we'll zoom back down a little bit just to see that planet. That planet is home, which is the Beit, or the Beit. It's your home. And as you zoom back in, into the city and into the room, this is your Beit. And you're the dagesh in it. You're the dot in it. And if you're not in that room, the room's empty. But you're a very vital part of that room, because you're the dagesh that makes that room a room. Without it, it's just a space. With it, it has some function. And so, while you're sitting in that chair, the whole universe is spinning around, and you're an insignificant, tiny, tiny little dagesh in a room. And yet, you're the vital part of the universe. Without you, a whole load of that wouldn't happen. And just breathe out again and open your eyes. And you can come back into the room and relax. And come back into being the Beit, the house and the dagesh all at once. I'll just stop the recording, if I can work out how. Takes me a while to do this.